Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name's Danielle and I'm the owner of Damn Fancy Creations and the Drunk Flamingo. In today's tutorial, we're going to be using another one of August Flockbox patterns. It was full of fall leaves and mushrooms and I just loved this kit so much. It has been a while since I have done a mug and I happened to find this one in my stock, and I just had this idea of putting the mushroom vinyl on part of the tumbler and then have these little mushrooms kind of peeking through the vinyl, kind of cascading down the cup. And I love when my vision comes to life. I think this tumbler turned out so cute, and it's probably my favorite out of August Flockbox patterns that I made. Everything you see listed here will be covered in today's tutorial, but don't forget to check out the description where I list all items needed to recreate this tumbler, as well as discount codes from my favorite suppliers. Now, if you're ready to get started, let's go, but make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming tutorials. All right, y'all, let's get started. Alright y'all, so here is the little mug we're going to be using, and I did tape off the bottom and I spray painted it with Rustoleum in the color Oregano. It is my favorite kind of dark sagey green, and then I lightly went over it with this stone texture, I guess, from Rustoleum. I just did a couple spritz of it. I didn't want it a super dark kind of stone coating. I just wanted a little bit to kind of give it some texture, and I really like how it turned out. So I am going to take this mushroom vinyl. This was actually just a scrap piece that I had from using this pattern for another cup, and I thought it would be perfect for a mug. So I am just wrapping it around the mug to get the circumference that I want. I do not want this to wrap all the way around the mug, just to kind of match up where the handles are. So I'm just holding it, wrapping it around the cup just to see where it matches up, and this is perfect. And I'm going to cut it at an angle, like a diagonal like this. So I'm just kind of, measuring with my finger, because that's what I do, of where I want this diagonal line to go. So I'm just holding it there. You can obviously mark it with a Sharpie or something if you want to, but this was pretty easy for me. So this is my little spot. And I'm just going to line that up to the corner, and I'm going to draw a line with a Sharpie. Just to connect those 2 points so I know where I'm going to be cutting. And since I want the same diagonal on the opposite side, I'm just going to fold this in half so that these corners meet. And then I'm going to take my scissors and cut along that line. So now we have our kind of little trapezoid shape. And now I'm just going to line that up. So this is exactly what I was wanting. So I'm just making sure that I have it lined up on both sides. So I'm going to, what am I doing? I don't even know. Oh, I think one was uneven. So I folded it again and trimmed off that little excess that I needed. Oh, and I did want it a little bit more of the cup showing, so I had a little bit more space to work with to put my mushrooms. So now I just cut a little bit of one side off, and this is when I realized that vinyl does not stick to textured paint very well. Who would have thought? It's one of those things where it's like, as soon as you do something, you're like, oh, that's right. Vinyl does not stick to texture. But I made it work with heat from my heat gun. So I'm just trying to line this up without that vinyl popping off, which you can see that it likes to do. And I wasn't getting frustrated at all with it. So I just decided to hold it and then just go ahead and start rolling that vinyl down as I pull that backing off. The good thing about this is if you need to reposition it, it comes off really easy. So one side was a lot over, it was too far over. So of course I just peeled the whole thing off and we tried again. And again. So once you're finally happy with how your vinyl looks, I'm just trying to line it up with the paint along the bottom. And then I got my heat gun on like a medium heat, and I'm just using that heat to warm up that adhesive on the back of the vinyl to help it stick to that cup as well as it can. Be careful not to overheat it, because then that can cause the vinyl to kind of lift on the edges and it won't lay down flat after that. But if you use a little bit of heat and kind of press that vinyl down, you will get it to adhere enough to epoxy it without it lifting. So I'm doing the same thing to the top of the vinyl, because we are going to use our edging tool to get rid of that vinyl up top. I am just trimming this big section off first. So now I'm using my edging tool from Cami Page Boutique. We do have a discount code down below if you guys have not tried her stuff yet. And I just put my cup right along that edge, and we get a nice straight line of vinyl. So I'm not worried about the spray paint at this point, because I will use this edging tool again after I epoxy. I just warm up the edges of my tumbler so that that epoxy is a little soft, and I just go around that with my edging tool. Usually I do that. For some reason I just decided to get the spray paint off now, which I'm pretty sure that I ended up using the edging tool after epoxy anyway, but that's what I usually do. That's the smarter way to do it. So again, I'm just using that heat gun to make sure all these edges are down well and are not going to lift. So now that we have our vinyl on, we are going to start applying our little mushrooms. So this little sheet of mushrooms was in August Flock Box. They are available on the site if you want to just purchase one sheet. And I am starting with the smallest mushrooms first, and we're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to kind of work our way up. So I'm going to apply small to medium to larger mushrooms so that we can get a little bit of different height variation and just all that fun stuff. And I am overlapping the vinyl right now, which we will go and trim in just a little bit. So I was already in love with how this cup was turning out. It's so cute. So I'm just fitting a little mushroom in the top corner. So now that we have our little mushrooms on, I'm just taking my blade And I'm going to trim these. But of course, because these were not sticking to the cup, I used my heat gun to adhere them so that when you try to cut them, they're not going to be sliding around on the tumbler. Which some of them may have done that anyway. So when I trim things, I like to use just a loose blade. I just get a better connection, I guess, to the whatever thing I'm cutting. Sometimes if I use a blade that is in a housing, that housing or the handle part kind of gets in the way of the angle that I need my blade to be, if that makes sense. So I just trim stuff with a loose blade. So I'm just trimming all of the little parts of the mushroom that may be overlapping the vinyl that we wrapped the cup with. How cute is it turning out, y'all? So once we have all of our little mushrooms on, if you see any that are loose, you can definitely use your heat gun to kind of press them down a little further. So I'm going to apply this decal. Usually I don't put a lot of decals on my tumbler, but I like to show you guys good ways to utilize the decals that I have. I know some of y'all get stumped on what to do, so I kind of like to show different ways to do things. So whenever I have a decal like this and we're putting it on a sheet of vinyl that may have a similar background, I like to kind of have some contrast between that. So I am just kind of dotting around our little decal. I just trimmed it, so this is still on the backing. So that way we get an outline of our little mushroom house. And I'm going to put foil behind there. This is one of my favorite ways to kind of distinguish between the background or the vinyl and then the decal itself. So I'm going to use this copper color. This is from, I believe, Artistic Painting Studio. And it looks, you know, shiny and smooth, but when you put it on your tumbler, it kind of has like a hammered effect, which I really like. It gives it more texture and dimension. So we're just going to use Tack It. I also use the adhesive from Artistic Painting Studio, but what I had was kind of dried up a little bit because somebody doesn't know how to screw the lids on to her containers and things end up drying out. But Tack It works fine as well. I'm just trying to get it out of here. And if you guys have never used Tack It or a foil adhesive, it goes on white like you see here, and it dries clear. But when it dries, it is still going to be tacky. So it's really good for foils or if you want to burnish glitter. And yes, I'm just using my finger because when I do the outside of our little decal, I want it to be a distressed look and not super smooth. Sometimes I use stippling brushes or stencil brushes, but sometimes I just use my finger, you know. So when you apply this adhesive, you don't want any thick areas. So I'm just smoothing some stuff out, but then still kind of like dabbing the edges of it. If you get it too thick, it will not dry properly and it will be kind of gummy and you won't be able to transfer that foil as easily. So I am going to dry this a little bit with my heat gun. You can also just let it sit. I would definitely let it sit for about 30 minutes. Even with drying it with the heat gun, sometimes you need it to sit for a little bit. And if I do use my heat gun, I don't put it on a high heat because you don't want to melt the adhesive. You just want to speed up that drying process. So I usually do it on a really low setting. So I'm just drying it as much as I can, and I thought that I could get it dry pretty quickly, but I ended up needing to just set it to the side for about 30 minutes, and then I came back to it. So now that our tacket is dry, you guys can see it's just kind of shiny. There's no white parts on it. So that means it is ready to apply the foil. So you can kind of see the difference between the matte vinyl and then the shiny tacket. So I am just going to take a little sheet of foil that I cut off, and we're just going to rub that into the adhesive. You can use your fingers, you can use a thick brush, you can use your vinyl squeegee. So I usually just start by lightly rubbing it and then see how that transfer takes. And this is kind of how I like my foils. I don't like a clean release. I like that distressing or distressed look. So now that I have kind of the large chunk of that tacket covered with the foil, I'm just going back around the edges, and we're just kind of pressing lightly and then pulling off. And you are just going to do this until you're happy with how it looks. So I'm just going around the entire edge. Wherever I can see or feel that tacket is where I'm going to press that foil. And you guys can kind of see on the video how it has kind of a hammered texture. It's not super smooth. So I'm just going to hold my decal up there. So I do need to add a little bit more to the bottom sides so that we get some of that gold outlining the decal. So now that we have our gold on there, we are going to remove the backing from our decal. And I'm just kind of going to hold this in the center, and it's pretty easy to line up. And then we're just folding down each side. So next, what we're going to do is grab some pinstripes. So I like this holographic rose gold, and we're just going to do black. I thought that the rose gold went well with the foil that we put on the tumbler. So we were just going to layer them black and then rose gold. And I'm just going to apply these pinstripes right along where the mushrooms meet the vinyl. And if you guys did not know, I do have a PinStripe file on the Drunk Flamingo. And it has all my popular sizes, which is 0.07, 0.05, and 0.03. And when I do pinstripes, I usually cut out a full sheet of multiple sizes. That way I have the option to layer them like I'm doing here, and you have multiple sizes and multiple colors. Again, we're just using that blank blade, the naked blade, just to cut those lines. And this little mushroom vinyl just wasn't lined up as perfectly as I wanted, so I went ahead and evened that up. And we're going to do the same thing for the top part. And then we're going to put our rose gold on. And I'm just going to layer this right in the middle of that black pinstripe. And then we're going to do the other side. And if you guys struggle with your pinstripes lifting under epoxy, a trick I use often is to apply UV resin or clear UV gel nail polish on the ends of my pinstripes and cure it. And that way those ends are going to stay down after you epoxy. So after we have our pinstripes on, everything is down well, we're going to take it downstairs and epoxy it. And if you guys noticed, we did this entire cup in one sitting without epoxy or anything, and now we're taking it down to epoxy. So this is just a quick little cup with a couple different techniques involved. And I just love how it turned out. I think it's so cute. And I'm being a little like not as precise when I'm applying this layer of epoxy, but that is because I will go back and edge the bottom and edge the top and then put my final layer of epoxy on. And so everything will be nice and clean. And we have to get our handle. I like to put epoxy on the back of the handle and then go in and put some on the inside. You do not need a thick layer of epoxy when you're doing it. Just use as thin of epoxy as you can because we don't want any globs around the handle. So you can see here I am wiping the handle. I am wiping where the handle meets the cup so that we get any of that excess epoxy removed. And then I like to wipe from bottom to top to smooth out my epoxy and just to make sure that everything is covered, there's no globs anywhere. And then I'm going to pop all of my bubbles with my torch. So after this layer of epoxy, I will edge the top and the bottom, get those cleaned up, and then I will put 2 more layers of epoxy over this little tumbler, and then she will be complete. So I will show you guys some finished pictures in just a second. So here are my finished pictures. I just love how this little mug turned out. I think it's so cute. It's so fall. I love the little fairies. If you guys made a tumbler using this vinyl, or if you recreated this mug, please post it in the Drunk Flamingo. I love to see what you guys come up with, what sorts of things inspire y'all, and how you make things your own, twists that you put on them. But that is it for this tutorial. I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this tutorial or learned something new, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to catch the next video coming up that was picked just for you. As always, if you're looking for more tips, tricks, or tutorials, be sure to check out my tutorial group on Facebook or our Drunk Flamingo group. Thanks for watching.